So we're going to talk a little bit about biosecurity. What can you do starting tonight to help protect your birds? But I want to talk about what biosecurity truly means. So if we're going to break down the origins of the word, bio means life. Think back to biology, life sciences, right? Security, it refers to protection, like a security guard. They're there to protect you at whatever event you're at. So ultimately, biosecurity is life protection. You now are in the mode of protecting the life of your birds. So for all purposes for us this evening, we are going to define biosecurity as the steps you will take to prevent or reduce the spread of the disease. There is no perfect recipe for biosecurity. So where should you start? Just like a recipe for chocolate chip cookies, we all have our own little tweaks and nuances to make the perfect cookie. Biosecurity is going to be the same for you at home because you all have different setups, you all have different housing. So there's no rigid rules to follow, but there's going to be some guidances that can help you along. So where should you start? First of all, you want to ask, what pathogens are we going to protect our birds from? Right now, the immediate need is protecting our birds from highly pathogenic avian influenza. Of course, there's going to be other types of pathogens that you will want to protect from any other day of the year, but we all know that this is our immediate need. You also want to ask yourself, what are you doing to protect from this disease risk right now? And how can we potentially do it better? And that's what I'm here tonight to hopefully get you to think about. We want to think about biosecurity ultimately as 3 tiers. We need all 3 tiers built together to create a whole picture of biosecurity. These tiers are not necessarily overwhelming. I'm going to break it down for you to be much more simple. So that first step is conceptual biosecurity. Think about it as your environment and what's around you. How you handle, or what's like, how you manage your flock. Is it just chickens or are there co-species? Are you near a pond or a lake? Are you near wooded areas? Are you in a poultry dense neighborhood? Say if you're in one of the metropolitan cities that allow backyard chickens. Are you in a heavily populated area? Are you in a rural area that's near a commercial farm? So what's the environment around you and what's the environment of the birds that you're keeping? That's conceptual biosecurity, and that has its own challenges that you're going to have to take into consideration. Again, each person here tonight is going to have different conceptual biosecurity and different ways they have to think about it because everybody's circumstance is different than their neighbor. The second tier is structural biosecurity. Structure. What do you physically have? What buildings do you have? What do you have for your runs? What's the structure of your management for taking care of your birds? All of those things need to be considered when you're also thinking about biosecurity. And the final tier of biosecurity is operational biosecurity. That's the human aspect of biosecurity. How are you implementing it? And implementation has a lot to do with communication. How are you interacting with your family, your neighbors, your friends? How are you interacting with extension and with the Board of Animal Health or your local veterinarian? And it really has a lot to do with our actions, what we are doing each and every day, what biosecurity steps that we are taking, and our diligence in those steps. So the very first step that you can take to protect your birds from avian influenza is to avoid attracting wild birds to your property. And you can do this by enclosing any feed areas if you're feeding your birds outside. We don't want to leave any buffet style opportunities for those wild birds to rest and have a snack while they are laying over. You also want to clean up any feed spills that may occur outdoors in a non-enclosed space. Again, we don't want to offer a snack for any migrating birds. And reduce puddles in standing water as much as is feasible. We don't want to create an opportunity for those birds to rest and stop in a puddle. And avoid visiting ponds and streams, especially with pets or family members who might think it's pretty fun to splash around in those waters and then bring that potential contamination back to your property. Number 2 is to limit or halt travel with your birds to sales, shows, and swaps. You may want to think twice and consider all of the options and scenarios before you make the decision whether you're going to go to that sale or swap, and make that decision based on what you feel your risk is in attending that event with or without your birds. Third is to limit your birds' visitors at your property. If somebody has to visit your birds, make sure you have the conversation about where they have been and what other potential interaction they may have had recently with other domestic poultry or even wild waterfowl. If they do come to your property after you've had that conversation with them, make sure that they wash their hands before arriving, maybe even when they get to your house or your property, and that they're wearing clean clothes and footwear. Wearing clean or barn or coop specific clothing and footwear also includes our hats and our gloves and our scarves. And we want to make sure that we aren't just wearing clean barn clothes, but our outerwear as well. You can see that there's ball caps there, there's coveralls hanging on the hook. Make sure that you are ensuring everything is barn specific while we're still dealing with it's trying to be spring, but it's still winter type weather. If you have new chicks on the way, or you've already picked up your new chicks, make sure that you are quarantining and isolating those younger birds from your existing flock. You want to make sure that they're not going to be bringing anything into your new flock, and that your new flock remains healthy when it is time to introduce them, should you be doing that as they mature. Wash your hands, and then wash your hands again. We've all gotten very good at this in the last 2 years with COVID. This is going to be an essential step, always making sure you have clean hands before you work with your poultry and immediately following any interaction that you've had with your birds at home. And our final step is to maintain and use a line of separation. This is a term that was introduced to our commercial industries after the 2015 outbreak, and I'm doing my darndest to help introduce this term to all of you as small flock owners as well, because it's really a really great term, actually, because the line of separation is a functional line that's going to separate your birds that are healthy and free of disease from the rest of the world that is potentially contaminated. So that line of separation is going to be that functional line. The best way to use a line of separation is to have it be something physical. For example, this happens to be a gate in the backyard of a Minneapolis home that has backyard poultry. It could be the walls and the door to your coop or your barn. For me at my home, my line of separation actually is my mudroom door. And so that's where all my barn specific clothing stays. And my line of separation is that door out of my mudroom so that I can go into the barn immediately from there. So understanding what that line of separation is and then adhering to the protocols that you're going to set up. Do you always have to wear your barn specific boots? Do you have a designated pair of mud boots, muck boots, an old pair of sneakers, something that you will switch into right at that line of separation? You can also see in this image that there's a wash tub. Obviously this is in the summer, so we're not dealing with the freezing overnight and having it be an ice chunk in the morning. But that's also where you would clean and disinfect your boots, is at that line of separation. So there's many, many different ways to implement this. So use a little bit of your critical thinking skills about how you could implement this at home. It's a simple thing to do, and making sure before you cross that line of separation that you're not bringing any potential contaminants into your poultry flock, on your clothing, on your body, or on your footwear. So some take-home messages about biosecurity: that it's an everyday prevention. It's not just going to be to prevent your flock from getting HPAI. It's an everyday prevention for every other type of disease that your birds can be susceptible to. Know that it will be an investment. It can be a financial investment, for example, to put up a fence, or to buy a $3 wash tub at Walmart that you can wash your boots in. But it's also an investment of your time, because it's going to take a little bit of effort. I will present it to you this way. Is 3 minutes of your time worth more than the health of your flock? That's a question for you to answer when you're thinking about your biosecurity. Also, when you're talking and thinking through and starting to implement your biosecurity, know what your management style is, what your habits are, and what your needs are, and make your biosecurity plan usable according to your management style. We call it a desire path. If you think about a school or the University of Minnesota campus, if in the wintertime you look at all of the trails through the snow rather than the sidewalks, somebody decided they wanted to take a more direct route to get from point A to point B. So they've walked somewhere else besides the sidewalks that are plowed. It's their desire path. They desired to get from A to B in a different way. So make sure that you can keep an open mind and think about those desire paths, and then critically think about how you can implement your biosecurity the best way for your management, for your family, and for your needs. And with that, remember to be flexible and adaptable. You're going to have to adapt in high risk periods. You're probably going to have to do things differently. You're going to have to put a little more time into the changes that you might be making. And being flexible and adaptable is all a skill that we've all learned to hone in on the last 2 years. So remember that it's going to be the same thing with your birds at home.